everyone, welcome back to Solacene, welcome back to the park, welcome back to the birds. We're so excited to be talking to you again this week about the news. Solacene as a concept is Erin and me, Alicia, designing a utopian future which is beautiful, sustainable, and tactile, and we're going to be going into some headlines that would appear in a newspaper in this ideal future.
Yes, today we are talking about the contents of said newspaper. We've each brought 5 headlines which we think will be equally illuminating on the nature of the Solacene, our utopia, as well as the nature of its journalism, because every news headline kind of tells you both about the subject of the headline and about the news platform that published it. So I think it'll be fun. Hopefully we haven't accidentally, because we didn't correspond about our things that we created, hopefully we haven't both covered the same imagined news story, but that would be crazy. But it's kind of happened on previous episodes like this.
Yes, we are one and the same in terms of our creativity.
Before we get into those specifics, I have a lightning round for you, because the newspaper, as we know, has its different sections. Every newspaper does, and we're going to be kind of assessing quickly whether each one should exist, basically.
Okay.
You be the dictator who decrees whether obituaries should exist. That's the first thing.
Yes.
You like them?
I like obituaries.
Okay, what about the funnies?
Yes.
What's your favorite funny? Oh, she is being outed now as a fake fan of funnies. Dilbert, ring any bells? Although I think he's problematic now.
Yeah, that's the problem with all of the comic strips that we probably were exposed to as kids. We're all
ads.
No ads. Boo.
How does it? Well, I guess we'll talk about that next week. Mm-hmm. It's just the platonic ideal, although it's not really platonic ideal of a newspaper, because I think the platonic. I think Plato is speaking about the truest form of a thing. Mm-hmm. We're trying to think about the best, at least in our subjective opinions. Weather. Should that be printed in the newspaper?
No.
What about classifieds?
No.
What are classifieds?
I think classifieds are kind of like ads, but they're searching for
jobs. I think it's job seeking and stuff like that, and apartments. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the few things that the internet has just improved on, with no real drawbacks. This week you've been being quite heavy on the buns. B-U-N-Z. Yeah,
the trading website.
And it's you just didn't really have those options so easy in times prior.
Yeah,
so.
When I was a kid, my dad it was called Mr. Barter, and it was basically buns, but it would be printed every week. And it would be mainly bigger ticket items, like vehicles and stuff.
Yeah, but this is, I have a bag of lentils.
Yes.
Can you give me?
A bag of peas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have obituaries. What about births? Is that a thing? I was wondering. I haven't read many newspapers in my life.
I feel like they used to announce births.
Which I think gives me a qualified outsider opinion.
Yeah, but I think...
What about birthdays? Are we getting to school, elementary school announcements?
I think the radio is a better place for the birthdays, to be honest, and even births.
Because it's transient. It just goes.
Yeah, and it's not like you have to print. You could list off, if there were 15 birthdays, a lot easier than you could kind of wasting paper space for them. Because it's sustainability. I think paper is fine, but we don't want the paper to be
we'll talk about that next
50
week.
pages.
I don't want to talk about how much paper we use. Recipes. Is that a thing?
I actually had an edition of recipes.
Okay, so
I think yes.
Events.
Yes.
Naked women.
No naked women.
I was reminded this week of there's a very famous tabloidy style newspaper in the UK which just had as a long standing institution, page 3 was a different naked woman each edition.
That's very British.
Yeah. So you said no weather, but I was thinking about, in similar kind of keeping up with the Joneses of the planet, what about some kind of regular report or feature of what was in bloom or the stars that were visible or that kind of thing?
Ooh, the nature pages.
The nature page, but it would be very small. It would be just a weather forecast, but it would be this week, look out for hemlock.
Ooh, I think that's a beautiful idea. Yeah. Yes.
Because we've spoken in the past about a kind of fascination for almanacs, and I think this could It's part newspaper, part magazine, part almanac, perhaps.
Yeah, because then if somebody doesn't want to have the whole almanac, and this would obviously be a bit less prediction, it would just be, we spotted the first strawberry on the strawberry plants, which is cute and nice.
Old Man Tyndall found a robin. We didn't think we had those anymore.
Yeah.
Or something.
That'd be really neat. And same with, the stars, full moon, being like the moon is waxing this week.
Yeah, and here's what that means. Because for some reason in our local newspaper growing up, there was just a full page for horoscopes.
That's a lot.
So not to speak down on anyone's beliefs, but I think rather than being, we're very concrete with it. It's the news, right? We're not making any kind of, it's not like a fortune cookie.
It's not a fortune cookie.
Although we could have, no. Okay, so the headlines. May I begin?
Yes.
Battle of the Bands draws record attendance. Organizers say a combination of print marketing, summer vibes, and pushback against digital media is responsible for the revival.
I love it.
Yeah.
I went in such a similar direction.
Oh no.
No, not necessarily Battle of the Bands, but just of kind of using the headlines as ways to say these are little tidbits about the Solacene.
Yeah, of course. Is our specific brand of Solacene kitsch.
Of kitsch.
Battle of the Bands is
yes.
straight in there.
I love it because it's local.
Exactly.
But it's also letting people know
the arts,
what's happening around them. Because not everybody would be a part of this underground scene. You can picture the
Sounds like
reporter.
it's quite overground, but yeah.
The reporter sitting in the corner, taking notes.
On a typewriter.
Or on one of those tiny pads.
Yeah. It was inspired by a couple things. One, I think almost everyone is incredibly in shock and disgust at concert prices. Because those have just seemed to have gone stratospheric in the last 2 decades or so. And I don't think it will necessarily slow down because those, I don't know, just like those big brands.
I think for those big brands, but I've gone to several, like, I don't even want to say smaller artists, like smaller than Taylor Swift, but still global names around Montreal, and the tickets are like $16.
And also inspired by my sneaky optimism that technological developments, in particular like AI and just the increasing digital consumption of people's lives, will lead to pushback and will lead to people escaping to the real world more and more, until that's hopefully the norm again.
Yeah, well, there's this week or next week in Montreal, the Art Slam, which I went to last year. For anyone listening who's in Montreal, this is a little plug for the Art Slam.
What is the Art Slam?
It's upstairs in a little venue, and there are 6 artists positioned in a circle, and they all have, I want to say it's like half an hour, and they make any painting they want. Then the people in attendance watch them paint them live, and then they vote on them, and then they rotate out. There's another group.
Yes.
And then the winners of each group go head to head.
See, I truly think people are getting sick of watching that same thing on Twitch.
Yeah.
I really think they're wondering, what am I doing with my life? We went to see the Cirque du Soleil this weekend.
A little bit of a news update. I was featured in Cirque du Soleil for 10 minutes for no particular reason. I was just chosen out of the crowd to be on stage.
She was on stage. I think it's because she is very circular, her face, and maybe they saw that.
Soleil, yes.
But it's this idea of like it's those events that make a place. That's a very famous example because Cirque du Soleil and Montreal or Quebec are kind of synonymous. But even to a lesser extent, I just think people, maybe with the splintering of culture also, like people will be like, I'm tired of Spotify pushing Drake into every single playlist. I'm just going to go to the Battle of the Bands and see what's happening. But there has to be this, we have to have this widespread like kind of intrinsic understanding that the music will be worse. Like the people will be less talented and it will be less well produced.
I think that's the main thing, is less well produced, because I don't think talent or...
I do.
You do think that?
Yeah, because we're used to listening to, like, there's a reason, I know people talk about pop music being garbage, but generally speaking, I think there's a reason that the popular music is popular and the popular films are popular and
Yeah.
like people watch professional sports rather than their local sports. I think generally speaking, it's because they're better. But
That makes
I
sense,
just think people need to make that willing trade-off. Go to a battle of the bands. You know Camp Rock?
Yes.
Is that soul? Of course it is.
Of course it is.
Camps are soul. Rock music is soul, especially surfer rock. And would you like to go to one of those? I just want to be part of a crowd which decides something by the volume of their cheering.
Yeah,
I've
I'd
never
love to
been
go.
part of that.
Love to go to a battle of the bands.
I think that happens at the end of Camp Rock. I think that's how they decide who wins.
Yes.
Is it Mitchie?
Mitchie?
Is it that other girl? There's lots of readers I've noticed in the park this summer.
Yes.
That's why I'm talking about the pushback. Also lots of sirens and noisy motors in the park today, which is why we have to keep cutting if people are curious. Yeah, a lot of people reading. I like that. Before you used to see them, and I'm not talking about e-readers, you used to see them on their phones a lot. I've seen precisely one person on a Nintendo Switch. I kind of tutted, but also kind of respected it.
Like at least you're out in the sun, getting some vitamin D.
But mostly people just chilling, being sexy and reading their book.
Yeah.
That's soulful.
I think people are really interested in just engaging with the real world and readjusting their tastes a bit to, like, lowering their expectations, as you're saying, but just, like, reacquainting themselves with local music or local sports even. Because I used to always think, why would I ever watch... Like, I didn't like sports at all. But then when you and I were traveling a little bit, we went to see a local soccer game, and I was like, wait, it's still, like, it's super fun. You just cheer for the team that you're there to support.
But that's what I'm saying. We went to see Northampton Town in the UK. The quality it's not like a Premier League match.
No.
But you know that going in. So yeah, we have to kind of change our priorities a little bit, I think. Although you did introduce me this summer angrily to the term performative reading. Maybe we'll get into that on another episode. What's your first headline?
My first headline, opinion. The ugly truth of the new fountain project. So this was inspired by yesterday. I went for a run in the 30-degree heat, and I thought I was going to pass out because I was so thirsty. I went to a park called Parc Géry, which has a bunch of fountains, like huge water fountains, not a single water fountain for drinking in the whole entire park. This is a big space. This is a big public space. And I was running for several kilometers, didn't cross a single fountain. And so I thought in the Solacene there'll be more fountains.
Yeah, of course.
But then I was thinking it'd be funny if, okay, so like say this newspaper came out and they had just announced that they're going to do this new project. They've been like secretly working on all of the fountains and stuff. And they did the big unveiling that week of like the fountain in every corner. And they looked like just really brutalist water fountains. And then this person writing the opinion piece was wanting them to be shaped more like aquatic animals or something like that.
Okay.
And everybody was up in arms because they did it.
Like in Rome.
Like in Rome, yeah.
Spectacular carvings.
And they're just like, yeah, water fountains for drinking. But the people of the Solacene were like, okay, cool, you did this, but you really should have made them look prettier. Because I think when people often design utopias, they think that everybody's happy and cool and all is one or whatever. But that's the thing with the Solacene, is it's not a utopia in that sense. It's more just like, it's going to be different depending on where you are in the world, and people will still have opinions. And so the opinion column is going to be about the new fountain project.
Well, I would say it's one of the things that makes a utopia, or makes the world better, is how people express their opinions.
Yeah.
And how they is kind of the collaborative, like, I'm going to write a piece about these fountains rather than I'm just going to gripe about it or worse, vandalize them or something like that. Yeah, that's nice. Water fountains, where are they? What's going on?
Yeah, Montreal infamously has very few water fountains.
Having
very
to drink
few
from puddles.
public,
filthy mud puddles.
basically.
I carry a straw with me and just drink from them. So my next one, on a similar note, is how nationwide innovation can improve our local towns, schools. I had the placeholder name of Huptown.
Huptown.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny, it's silly.
It's a bit Americana.
Yeah. How nationwide innovation can improve our schools. And I thought about this as a reframing of a very popular negative kind of headline strategy, which would be something like Hubtown's education system is failing because of X, Y, Z. Or it'd be like the grades are down compared to nation average. So it's the same sentiment. It's the same emotion, which is people concerned about local education and the future of the town or the country, which is a very a noble thing to be concerned with and ostensibly for the newspaper to be writing about. But often it's this outrage bait. And the reason I say it's popular is because a lot of news media will deliberately go negative because negativity sells, and I think people get hooked on it.
Yeah.
So then there could be another follow-up on this in a couple of weeks about, here's another example, it's like the roof is falling down in school, or here's this illiterate kid, or something like that. But I think reframing it like how nationwide innovation can improve the schools.
Yeah, it's in the school isn't perfect, it needs improving.
But look at these other examples around the nation. And it's not opinion, like these are news things about, look, this school implemented this. This school board started doing that. And so, yeah, it's like the content is similar, but it leaves people feeling more empowered rather than just enraged. There is still that dissatisfaction because I don't think it would lie about if the numbers are down. Like you'd still report on that kind of thing. But I just don't think it would end there, and maybe it could even conclude with like, and the next public school board meeting is at this date at this place.
Yeah.
Because I think it's kind of the media's job to, if not organize and like amplify the organization of such councils.
Yes, I agree. My next headline is News of the World Public Lecture Series lineup. So I had this idea that instead of having a local newspaper and a global newspaper, there could be a weekly public lecture where the town's expat journalists, or like a couple of them, return home and they give a lecture on what they've been reporting on.
Yeah.
And there you can pick up the reports. So it's like you're not constantly every single morning news inundated with global news.
Yeah.
It's more of like a once a week thing. And you go and you can listen if you want. It's not like forced on you. And you could also pick up the reports there as kind of supplemental to your morning local news. I'm not 100% on this, but I think it'd be an interesting concept to make it a bit more optional and a bit more communal. And you also get to meet the journalists, which I think would be kind of cool. But it would be once a week in the local newspaper, the lineup would be reported. It'd be like, Philip is back from France for the week, reporting on the French.
The Second French Revolution.
Yes, exactly.
Jeepers.
And that'd be cool. And
I think lectures are very soul. Lectures are very soul
Lectures.
as seen. I remember in my high school, we had one guy who I think maybe went to the high school, but he was like a kind of a political scientist, and he was very up to date. Like he traveled to China and Russia and all these places that were incredibly exotic and in some cases scary to us, and just sat in the gym and like answered questions about, so do you think North Korea is going to do this? Or like, what's going to happen in this part of the world? And what about oil and this kind of, and he would give just informed opinions about it because as a high school populace, we hadn't actually had that opportunity because teachers, for all their good, often aren't exactly experts on the thing that they're talking about. So, yeah, I think going to that, which is a similar kind of thing as that, asking firsthand people who have been to those places and know those things. I mean, I do think world news, it should have a presence in the newspaper, in my opinion, in the news cycle.
To say that it would be a bit, so you have this weekly kind of once a week thing. Maybe it could even be the daily newspaper that day is just global news, but then it could be touched on in the other ones. But it would be grounded in reality and grounded in a slightly more in-depth knowledge, just not a sensational headline like new war. It'd be like, okay, we went to this lecture last week, or at least we heard our friend went to this lecture and they shared the news that there was like a new conflict that broke out in some part of the world. And then the following weekly newspaper, it would perhaps be a bit more about like our place in this, how you can help, how we contributed to this conflict or whatever.
I just still think in the Solacene news spreads it's not like we're taking months to spread news anymore. Like, it's still going to be instant on the internet, but this can be an opportunity for more in-depth discussion about it.
Yes.
More context. And along those lines, also, my world news report is, the headline is Correction on Last Week's Major World Incident Report, whatever it is. Second French Revolution, big earthquake or some kind of disaster or foreign election or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think...
Beetle. It's a big beetle.
Jeepers. There's a big beetle approaching me, and I don't want to... I'll just leave it. Although it feels weird on there. It's scary. I think the push for speed, especially on really heavy global topics like that, leads to a lot of journalistic mistakes, and also news outlets themselves engaging in the kind of speculation which used to be reserved for people upon reading those news outlets. So, like, for instance, there was a pretty big news story a couple days ago in the USA as of recording, but it's like, because there's such an instant, like, this thing happened, all the articles from BBC, CNN, blah, 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 I was like, maybe it was this, maybe this happened, maybe it's like, but you're supposed to be the news.
Just give it a sec.
You're just pushing theories. And I think the likes of CNN would be, I think people would like them a lot more, or at least respect them a lot more, if they weren't just obsessively, compulsively trotting themselves out as the most trusted name in news. Because it's like a Kleenex brand saying, like, we're the best tissue, or like toothpaste brandishing everything with 9 out of 10 dentists recommend this. It's like, we don't need this kind of self-promotion.
Yeah.
In fact, it would be more likable if you said, sometimes we get it wrong. Because they're human, so of course, like, there'll be mistakes and news comes out slowly.
Yeah.
But I think when those mistakes are made, they shouldn't be brushed under the rug. There should be maybe a corrections page. Hopefully it doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, you have an article about it, just saying, this is what went wrong, this is what we thought and why, and this, like, just the literal transparency. We got a report from someone who this, or we misunderstood this, or, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that would, it would just endear people more. It would make them trust it more, in other words. Because I really think we are all about transparency now.
Yes.
Which is why we're unedited.
Yes.
On Solacene, the most trusted name in imagining.
Beautiful. My next one, potholes, a retrospective.
Jesus.
So it's going to be...
Yours all sound very much like fake headlines or something like that.
Well, that's what it
Sure,
is.
yeah.
Potholes, a retrospective. So it's going to be a bit of a historical piece about the town, about how it went from having no roads to having paved roads to having what I will call, like, green roads or sustainable transport and stuff. And it's going to be a little bit about reminiscing about how bad potholes were, because they don't have potholes anymore because they don't have cars.
Right.
Yeah, and I just thought it'd be a funny name, honestly.
They, like, retroactively name and characterize all the potholes. Like, everyone will have remembered old Bessie on the North Road going out of town.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
like
So I thought that'd be kind of funny, and kind of like for old people, I feel like sometimes in newspapers they're a bit aimed towards, like, people who like to reminisce.
Yeah, this caters incredibly so to old people.
Yeah.
I think they would love a, like, 3,000 word long read about potholes. I remember that one. I fell in that one as a kid.
Yeah, it's like, I sprained my ankle. So that's potholes retrospective.
Did you ever have sinkholes? What's going on with that?
You had sinkholes too?
Yeah, we had sinkholes.
Well, the town that I grew up in was built over a mine.
Yeah.
So there were sinkholes left, right, and center.
Did you ever fall in one? Did anyone ever fall in one?
People fell in them. Because it was on,
Probably shouldn't
infamously,
laugh,
one was on just, like, the main road, and one was on the main trail.
Yeah.
Just sucked them in.
I remember... sinkholes, I would say that they're not in the Solacene, but they are also kind of soul.
It's such a weird...
It's like quicksand.
Yeah, it's like quicksand. It's like a small natural disaster.
I just remember this one incredibly narrow one that someone... It was just in a parking lot for a decade that just had a traffic cone over it. It's because no one knows what to do. What do?
You have to fill them back in and reinforce and stuff.
Yeah. traffic comes easier.
Yeah, ours was there for about a year on the trail, and I remember I'd have to run around it. Like, you'd have to go up this, like, embank, because it's basically...
How wide was it?
It was big.
Wow.
Like, the size of 2 or 3 cars, probably.
Yowza.
Yes.
Okay, my fourth headline is Local Plumber Pushes for Green Technology. And I was writing the subheading for this, and it was going to say, this week's Hubtown Hero, blah, 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 and that would be the name of the feature, Hubtown Hero. It's a weekly feature where we kind of interview or like share from a local guy or girl who just has... The key thing is it has to be a very boring job. No offense to them, but like it has to be a very under the radar, but, you know, integral job like plumber or something like that. The reason I ditched the Hubtown Hero shtick is because I feel like I always kind of roll my eyes at that. I was doing it on autopilot, and then I was like, no, actually, I don't want to do Hubtown Hero.
I had Citizen of the Week.
I just think it's slightly condescending when they're like, during the pandemic, it's like, the essential workers, these are the real heroes. I just think, it's like, no, they're just normal jobs.
Yeah.
But we can still kind of...
we can still praise them. We can
still recognize them.
Yeah, recognize them.
And I think that this would be part educational, like a how it's made thing, where people are like, oh, plumbing, oh, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? It sounds very, very boring, but I feel like in print you could kind of, and in an interview you could add some colour to it.
I think a kid would like to read that. I want to be a plumber when I grow up.
Exactly. I was thinking when I was coming up with this, I was like, because we do the bring your parent to school day kind of thing. What's that called?
Career day?
Yeah,
maybe?
career day or something like that. But then when you're a grown-up, you kind of just assume to know all the careers. But I don't know anything really more about plumbing than I did when I was 8, which maybe reflects poorly on me. But I just think for that kind of service, features like this, and it wouldn't just be random, it would be people who I think are doing very good work, or there's some kind of development in the field. That's why I said like pushes green technology. Like maybe there's a new kind of pipe material, or a new kind of pipe, or maybe it's something specific to a new building that they're doing in the town.
I think that's really cool.
Local podcasters record outside, and there's a picture of us, like a thumbnail of us.
Yes. My next is a comic about local politics called Dea's Dark Day.
Okay.
Dea is the mayor of Hubtown.
Sure.
And it's basically
This
apparently...
is just a 3-panel comic, or
it's a comic.
Okay.
But it's giving local news, and it's giving a critique on it.
Sure.
But basically, apparently in Hubtown, there has been these...
Hup, with a P.
Hubtown.
Yeah, Hubtown. Hiccup-town.
Okay, cool. There's been a local band of shade lovers who have been installing public umbrellas, and that's why it's called Dea's Dark Day. Because she was really irritated by it, because it was killing off the flora underneath wherever they put these umbrellas, and they just thought that they could say, okay, stop putting up the umbrellas, but they're really fighting against the power, but they're technically doing nothing wrong.
You make the people of the Solacene sound like gnomes. Sneaking around putting up umbrellas.
Well, I was trying to think of some kind of like vandalous activity that isn't necessarily graffiti or anything. But these guys are like anti-sun. They're really like pro-sun protection, and they're trying to make a critique on how the soul sites are spending too much time in this direct sunlight.
Sure.
Because they're worried about skin cancer rates or what have you. So the mayor is just like pleading with them, and the comic strip is about this. Yeah. But I think comic strips are fun, and I really like political comics, but they don't have to always be like mean-spirited, because it's like, this is like subtly saying, okay, maybe the mayor could have done a better job of this, but not being like drawing her as an umbrella or what have you.
Yeah, do you like those kind of crude caricatures of like making the president look like exaggerating all the worst features and...
Yeah, I don't think that's great, but I think you can still say, well, this was a bit of a fumble.
We're attacking the people in power using comedy.
Yeah, I think you can critique the people in power through comedy, but I don't think you should ever attack them, because they're in power. Like, they were voted in, you have to respect that and try and support them, I think. And
in Solacene, yes.
Yes.
Today, maybe no, but yes. Calvin and Hobbes, just a shout out. Solacene recommends for the week. Calvin Hobbes, because it got me through some dark times.
It's true.
I was strangely obsessed with it as a preteen, and it very much inspired the shrine to cartoons which I built in my closet. Okay, my final one is preliminary talks held over new Solacene amusement park. Local opinion split despite promise of economic benefits. This was inspired by a video we watched on YouTube by a channel called Defunct Land. Also, a Solacene recommends. They're weirdly compelling.
Is weirdly good, yes.
Which was talking about Kid Cities, which was a type of amusement park which was big in Mexico, I think, in like the 90s, where it was like, we're going to take a mall and make 2 floors of it a tiny city for kids that they can go in and they pretend to be adults kind of for a day and run different businesses. And they were trying to spread this, and it was like, we're going to try and build a kid city in, I think it was New Jersey or somewhere in the US, but the town voted against it because they thought it would
bring too many tourists.
Tourists and parking and all that kind of boring things. And I was kind of like, I'm sure that still happens.
Yeah.
But I think it's a newspaper's job to make people know about it. Because I think if one of those were to happen in Montreal, I wouldn't know about it because I'm not on IG.
Yes.
So I think, the newspaper, just that kind of like those small democratic things regarding, like, as I said earlier, like the education system, or should a new amusement park come to town?
Yeah.
I think the people should have a say in that.
I agree.
And it's kind of the news media's job to facilitate that.
We often say when it comes to like local referendums and things, it's like if you start doing referendums for one thing, it's going to end up being for everything. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a referendum, but holding public council, public opinion polls, these types of things would be useful. Like if the government respected, just like you don't need to hold a whole referendum to say the park's not going to be there, but you could do a petition or what have you.
Yeah, or a meeting with the people from the park.
Yeah.
But also when you say like, oh, it's a slippery slope where you gather public opinion for everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it should be. That's democracy.
To an extent, yes. I know there's representative democracy where you trust other people to do that, but for big things, I don't see why not.
Yeah.
So those are my 5.
Beautiful.
We had the Battle of the Bands, the local plumber, the nationwide innovation can improve Hubtown schools, correction on last week's major world incident report, and preliminary talks held over new Solacene amusement park. I think it's an average day. It's not supposed to be something spectacular.
Fantastical. So my final one is, it's kind of like a classified, because I was picturing, there's no ads, there's no necessarily classifieds, but there are perhaps these little spots that people could announce a new play and do a call for actors. So this one is going to be a little segment, and it says call for actors and announcement for new play, Antony Gaudi's life. So it's going to be a musical interpretation of Gaudi's architecture and artistic style and his life. And they're wanting actors. It says, do you have the chops?
Ooh.
These types of things. And you can submit, or you can show up to the casting auditions at the specified date. I also had a few other these are just little small things that could be in the paper. Recipe, as you said. I think recipe of the week would be really fun.
Who submits? Is it by a local, the in-house newspaper cook, or is it just town sourced?
It could depend. It could be sourced, like you could submit your recipe. It could be a local restaurant, like one of the chefs submits a recipe.
And this, I think, is the kind of place where you can do, I learned this recipe from my grandmother when we used to pick no one wants to read that on the internet, but in print, it's a little bit more laissez-faire, I think.
Yeah, and it's one recipe. It's not the endless amount on the internet. Citizen of the Week, which you touched on, and a local poll. So every week there'd be a poll, and you vote through either like calling in or mailing in or something. Like it's the way that you vote.
Yeah.
And then you get the results from last week.
And it can be like a silly poll.
It could be, like what was the favorite movie that was in the theater this week? Or what's your favorite plant that's in bloom? Or
I like that. Kind of like a Splatfest in Splatoon.
Yeah.
Indoor kid reference. Incredible.
And I just think it'd be fun because people would maybe be talking about it. They'd be like, what did you vote? Did you vote for hot dog or hamburger?
Or, but maybe there could be some kind of concrete resolution. So at the next summer barbecue, we're going to do hamburgers. Old heads will know also on the Nintendo Wii, the Everybody Votes channel. Did you used to know about that?
I wasn't on Everybody Votes, no.
Did you know about it though?
I did know about it.
Yeah, Everybody Votes. So can you just run through your 5?
My 5 were The Ugly Truth of the New Fountain Project, Potholes, News of the World.
No, it's not just potholes.
Potholes are retrospective. News of the World, Public Lecture Series, Dea's Dark Day, and Do You Have the Chops?
I love how kind of editorialized your headlines are. Yeah, I love the events page because frequently, as I've moaned to you and moaned on the podcast, like, we won't know things that are happening practically on our back door.
Literally in our front doorstep.
Because it's like,
sometimes,
oh, you weren't following Montreal blog on IG? No. Put some posters up, or in this case, put it in the events page of the newspaper. Then you don't even, I mean, this is kind of like theft, but you don't even need to buy it. You can just go to the store or the vendor, flip to the events page what's on the back, bam, 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 bam. Okay, that's what's happening this week, or this weekend. I think that's neat. I had a poem to close, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Because last week we mentioned we should talk about that kind of education, or like the ideal or the principle of surrounding oneself with diverse opinions and how the news can often insulate us. We didn't have time for it in the episode, maybe we'll talk about it this week, but I had a little poem which kind of touches on it. Metaphorically. So it says, doesn't the river hold its course over hills and twists of land, under rain and snows which freeze it, sometimes flooding, ever flow, springtime melt, salmon go, doesn't it reach the ocean, don't all the rivers meet? It's kind of a play on streams of information, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week while we design the Solacene newspaper in a bit more of a concrete sense.
Salut!